Another elite evil draft, another elite evil manager. Today I'm joined by the world number 80, Copenhagen Wednesday, sharing his team and tips for the start of the season. So, welcome back for another video. Hey Copenhagen, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
It's my pleasure to have you on my YouTube channel and start talking about your first draft for the season or my big current draft for game week 1. Yeah, it's great. Uh, we're already now to start sharing your selections. We'll start by the goalkeeper position. Uh, in goal, you have Onana. What's your explanation for this pick?
Yeah. I'm not thinking too far ahead. I'm thinking the first 6, 7 weeks, and I probably would like to game week around, excuse me, to wildcard around game week 9, although as in previous years, maybe it happens before, but my point is I'm not thinking so far ahead. I don't think well, there's one standout choice, and that's Edison from Manchester City, but I got horribly burned by him last season, and I'm just not ready to trust him in goal again. So, are the remaining goalkeepers, or if you look at the remaining teams, there aren't so many who have fantastic defensive expected uh, numbers for the first six. Manchester City with an expected 2.8 clean sheets. The next is Liverpool at 2.1. I don't trust those numbers. And then come Arsenal, Brighton, Chelsea, and a little bit further down is Manchester United. So it reflects the fact they haven't got the greatest fixtures, but Onana I like because of, and it's way well discussed so far. I think he's going to get good bonus points this season from the way he distributes the ball.
How many clean sheets do you expect from Onana for the first opening 5 game weeks of Man United?
If it's the first 5 weeks, I would say 2 or 3. I'm not expecting more than that, but I would like some bonus points.
I think it might be only 2 clean sheet, which put me off defensive option from Man United for the start of the season. But after game week 5, I think most of us will have at least have one defensive pick from Man United. Okay, start now sharing your defender. You start with 3 defender right now.
So my defenders, yeah, so we've got Chilwell, Stones, Estupinan, Henry, and I think it's Baldock, but it doesn't matter who the last one is. Um, Stones, I want as many Manchester City players as I can get. They're the team who has by far the best fixtures for the first 6 games, by far. They're the best team. Everybody will have Haaland, so it doesn't matter that you have Haaland because everybody else does. It's a question of who else can you get from Manchester City. And there's a risk with Stones, of course, with his minutes. But I think the upside compared to Diaz, for example, is worth that risk with him playing in midfield as opposed to playing in defense. So I'm prepared to go with Stones as my Manchester City choice. Uh,
The third pick is Tubinian from Brighton.
yeah, Stupinan, it's I think he's probably the most selected goalkeeper. So try again, the most selected defender so far in the game with good reason. They have fantastic fixtures. The first 3 games, he's an extremely attacking fullback. So
Under price for only 5.0 million. I expect him to get to be at least 5.5 million. Underpriced and very attacking defender for a very attacking team with a good opening 3 fixtures at least. I think he's logged in my team and in your team as well. I'll start sharing your midfielders. You have 5 midfielders.
I have 5. Well, I'm pretty sure we all have 5, but I'll be playing 5 at the start. So Bruno, Martinelli, Saka, Foden, and Mitoma.
Interesting, you don't have Rashford in your draft.
Not yet.
What's your explanations for having Bruno over Rashford?
He was what at 8.5. He was apart from Haaland, obviously. I think he was the next name on my team. I think that's too cheap. He underperformed in real life last season, but his numbers were fantastic. They've now signed Rasmus Højlund as the new striker, so he has somebody decent to aim for in front of him. So I expect his performance to increase. If you were to look on FBref, for example, at some of the expected data for last season, then he's significantly higher than Rashford. Rashford is equal with Martinelli, but Bruno is way in front for expected non-penalty XG. And that's before we put penalties into the equation.
Rashford is much better for expected goals, but when you check the expected assists, Bruno is the best.
Exactly.
I think is a top midfielder and a top player for expected assist, or maybe second after Kevin De Bruyne. But regarding big chance created, he created 32 big chances. He was the best and the top ahead of Kevin De Bruyne, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Trippier.
Yeah, and he's on penalties.
Yeah, it's a great advantage. I own him for the final maybe 8 game week. Last season he was much unlucky. Many assists he can get and even some goals. He missed some hitting the post. I think he was much unlucky and deserved more points last season.
Yes, we agree. I think he's a great choice. I think what your question is really getting at is why don't I have Rashford? Yeah, and I don't have Rashford because I'm going for Martinelli. And I can't squeeze Saka. Well, I could, but it would mean too many compromises. So I'm betting on.
What about Martinelli expected minutes?
That's the big question mark, and that's why I said I haven't got Rashford yet. Um, if we look at going back to those first 6 games, then of course City have the most expected goals. That's to be expected. But Arsenal are clearly in second place for expected goals over the first 6 weeks, with averaging over 2 expected goals per game. So I want as much of that attack as I possibly can do, and that's why I haven't got Gabriel, as everybody else seems to do in defense. I would like to go for 3 Arsenal attackers. Change at the wild card or change somewhere down the line. But while the fixtures are that good at the start, then I would like as much as possible. With the caveat which you mentioned that if, and hopefully we get some indication maybe in the Charity Shield game next weekend, if he's looking like being a 60-minute player, then that would very much change my calculations. But I'm hoping, shall we say, I'm hoping for a really good season for Martinelli. And with those fixtures being so strong, I would like to.
Totally agree, and I have only one question for you, midfielders. No love from Bomo.
No. And I mean, you've already heard me mention a few data sources, and this is a pure gut pick. Mbuemo's numbers aren't bad. He has decent statistics, but I want to see more from Brentford in this post-Tony period than I've seen thus far. I haven't seen any preseason games. I have to caveat that, but I just don't have the feeling for going for Mbuemo. I don't see him anywhere near the same as some of the similarly priced options. There must be 6 or 7 players I would pick before Mbuemo. From the top of my head, that would be March, who I think is March at Brighton. Everybody's ignoring March, myself included, but he has really good numbers and extremely low ownership. Richarlison, who we maybe come on to later, I think is going to be a really interesting pick for Spurs. I'm not so. I think it's one of those positions or one of those choices that we often make at the start of the season, every season, like Neto and Leon Bailey last season, with these great hopes that they'll be fantastic. And actually, after 3 weeks, we're going, "Oh my God, what was I thinking?" That's how I feel about Mbuemo, and I might be wrong. And if I am, then I pay the price. But right now, he's not in my thoughts.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Regarding some midfielders you can consider for the start. What about Chelsea and Tottenham midfielders or attackers maybe?
Well, let's start with the Chelsea attackers. Do they have any? Sorry, not the Chelsea Spurs. So they have Kane, and I keep looking at the news, and he hasn't left yet, but he almost certainly is. The one who really interests me is Richarlison at Spurs.
Even if Kane stays,
No, No, if Kane stays, then I think there were lots of question marks also in terms of how will Tottenham play with Kane in this new system. But if, and as I expect he will, if Kane leaves, then it seems, well, I shouldn't be so, I'm not an expert, but I was listening to the Above Average podcast, which I would suggest everyone listens to from earlier this week with the other Spurs podcast guys who were giving a really good in-depth analysis of how Spurs will line up under Ange. And Richarlison,
Madison is so tempting for me. I might put an eye on him and monitor his minutes. His performance for the start of the season might be a huge big if we notice his minutes and his attacking returns might be a great pick for game week 3.
yeah, I agree completely. Personally, I'm a bit more for Richarlison because I think would be finally playing as the number 9 role that he plays so well for Brazil, but Madison's a fantastic pick. Of course he is. So I think those two, and so good, I would say that I'm not even looking at, I might be surprised, but I don't expect Son to offer such great value for money this season, even though his price has dropped because Richarlison and Madison are so comparatively cheap to him. And I expect similar returns. So I think it will be Richarlison and excuse me, Richarlison and Son, pardon me, Richarlison, Madison from Spurs, from Chelsea. I think we're all a little bit wait and see. And Kunko seems to be the most interesting of the attackers, but Jackson also looks pretty good in preseason. But it's their midfield which bothers me. Um, in
It's all about the expected minutes of Jackson. I think if he's nailed for 80 or 70 at least minutes, will be a great pick.
But I also want to see a Chelsea who can control the game. And right now, I think their midfield is quite weak in the center. So if they get Casado or somebody else alongside Enzo, then I start to become convinced of this Pochettino project. But I'm a little bit nervous right now that yes, they look great in preseason, which is historically not a very good indicator of league form. So I want to see a few goals, but we have the chance where they have. It would be interesting to bring them in from game week 3 when Chelsea's decent run starts. So we have a few game weeks to look at Chelsea and assess how Jackson and Nkunku are playing, and see if they sign a better midfield player, number 6, alongside Enzo. So we have time to assess Chelsea, at least the attackers. But I don't think outside of Nkunku and Jackson, we'll be looking at too many of the Chelsea the players. I mean, everyone. Sterling has had a huge price fall, but I see nothing in preseason which makes me think he's going to be the big asset for Chelsea
I
midfield.
think you are dealing Chelsea and Tottenham as wait and see.
Well, if Kane if Kane leaves tonight or Kane leaves this week or Kane leaves before the start of the season, I would be really tempted to find a way to get Richarlison into my lineup from the first week because I expect I expect Tottenham to concede all the time, but I also expect them to score all the time. And if Richarlison is number 9, I like that.
Number 9, and we now are going to see your number 9s, Haaland and Gabriel Jesus
Yeah.
from Arsenal. You are doubling up on Arsenal. As you mentioned, you prefer their attack rather than their defense for the start of the season. Uh, but what's your plan regarding Liverpool in game week 2 at least against Bournemouth? Are you considering players like Darwin Nunez or Mo Salah?
Well, let's start with the easy ones. I'm not considering Salah and I'm not considering Trent. For Trent, I would want to be feeling rather certain that they were capable of keeping a clean sheet. And so much, as we saw from the beginning of last season, so much of Liverpool's defensive ability is based upon how their midfield trio play. And they have in preseason, well, they have no proper number 6 yet. Let's see who they signed. They've just sold Fabinho and Henderson, but they have no number 6 yet. Trent was playing as number 6, which makes him uninteresting. So my point being, unless I can see Liverpool keeping clean sheets, which would add hugely to Trent's points and especially bonus potential, then I'm not interested in Trent. Similarly, with Salah, I mean, he always has the ability to go completely crazy and score fantastic amounts of points. For that sense, I love him, but I'm almost never going to put the captain on him. maybe in game week 2, but it would be the only week out of the first 6 weeks that I would consider captaining him. And I think he's too expensive for somebody who I wouldn't captain, especially when there are so many other interesting ways to spend the money in the team. The interesting ones, however, you mentioned one of them, that's Darwin. Again, he's looking great in preseason, just like last year. His numbers on FBRF are absolutely fantastic, just like they were last season. But last season, he couldn't hit the goal to save his life, despite having fantastic numbers. So I'm cautious of going there again. The other one who I really like, always have, is Jota. But there's this whole X minutes question mark about the whole Liverpool lineup and the way that they play. So I'm happy to wait. And you mentioned the Bournemouth game, and everyone talks about the Bournemouth game because of the 9-0 last year. But that was a Bournemouth team who were in complete crisis last season. The manager and the board arguing all the time, no players having been signed. They were tactically inept.
But we might see at least 3 goals from Liverpool.
You're right. I agree completely, and that's what the stats say too. 11FI has it as a 3-goal game for Liverpool, but not 9. Uh, so it doesn't mean that I want to go all in for one game. I like to think in terms of a block of games rather than one game. So
In terms of expected points for game week 2, it looks like Erling Haaland is expected to score more points rather than Mo Salah, even when Haaland playing against Newcastle United and Liverpool playing against Bournemouth.
I've seen those numbers too. I'm a little bit skeptical, if I'm being honest, but I think the difference is not enough for me to justify imbalancing my squad to squeeze in Salah from the start. If I thought that Darwin's preseason form would translate into league form, if I thought his X numbers would translate into FPL points, and if I thought he was nailed, then he would be in my team. But all three of those assumptions are unknown. So I'm happy to wait and see and go with Jesus for the time being.
I think I mentioned in my last video for my current draft that I might go with Darwin Nunez for the opening 2 game weeks, just a trial before switching to an Chelsea attacker for game week 3 with the great run of fixture. It will be a trial and can be corrected if we shocked to see 3 or 4 big chances.
It's a good choice. It's an interesting choice, and it has a very high upside. So
Finally, we get your bench. We have Joao Pedro and 2 defenders. What's your explanations for it?
João Pedro that's the one I'm most questioning right now. He's there because I could afford him, and he seems to be uh, taking up immediately an interesting role in the Brighton team. On the other hand, he's sitting on my bench. He's not in my 11. So he's not going to score me any, even if he plays fantastic, he's not going to score me any points unless one of my other 7 forwards isn't playing, which is maybe a slightly stupid use of 5.5 million. So I'm a little bit in doubt about whether I should have him because I'm not even sure when he plays. But I am expecting something from him. And these first 3 weeks, it will be a very nice, strong first bench option to have. Um, and I suspect that once we've got past their initial 3 games, and once we know about the Chelsea strikers or the situation with Richarlison and Kane at Spurs, or how Darwin is looking at Liverpool, then that space would open up to be one of those other strikers once we know more about which one to go for. Similarly, I'm already thinking that I'm not 100% certain that Jesus stays in my team for so long. I think from game week 5, then Callum Wilson becomes really, really interesting if he's still fit. So that could be an interesting swap there. So that third spot is just for the beginning, and I'm quite open to playing around with who takes over from there.
Uh, Really so great draft, solid. And for me, I have almost the same team with some few changes, but looks like a great draft and might have some changes around game week 1. Was so happy to have you on my YouTube channel sharing your team, and thanks for responding and accepting my invitation for this video.
You're very welcome.
And thanks guys for watching. Can drop a like and subscribe, find it helpful, and your comments are welcome.